Hello, and I want to welcome you to the Digital Credentials Roundtable for May 23rd, 2022. Our usual host, Kelly Hoyland, who's the Higher Education Program Director, or Program Manager rather, excuse me, here at IMS Global / One EdTech. She's traveling today, and she asked that I help out as host for today. And to say a little bit more about each of those things, IMS Global Learning is rebranding and changing its name to One EdTech. And for those of you who are joining us for Learning Impact this year, which is in Nashville, Tennessee, June 13th through the 16th, we'll be rolling out that change much more broadly and sort of officially then becoming One EdTech. And we'll share more resources for information about that after today's call. And I'm Dan Blickensderfer, and I'm the Technical Program Manager for Digital Credentials here at IMS. I manage the Open Badges and Comprehensive Learner, or CLR standards, and the associated technical project groups who are working on those standards. I'll be helping facilitate today's session. If you could, as we go along, please feel free to put your questions in chat, and I know our presenters will, if as things come up, they may address them in chat, and we'll certainly have we'll have time at the end as well. For your questions, so please do share them. I have a poll right now that I will launch so that we can just use this to get a sense of your roles and where you are with your own interest in digital credentials. Is everyone able to see that poll? There we go. Fantastic. I'll give that another moment to run. Many folks statistically from information technology, from IT today have joined us. And we have folks who are interested in both CLR and micro-credentials and badges. That's great to see. And we have folks who are in the process of implementation, at the planning stage, and investigating. And I'll give you just another moment to chime in the poll. Fantastic, and I'll share that. So great. So the topic of today's session is My Spartan Story, documenting the co-curricular learning on the Spartan experience record. And My Spartan Story is Michigan State University's co-curricular record, and it formally recognizes and supports student learning beyond the classroom. It was launched in 2020. The record documents student engagement and learning in non-credit bearing activities such as leadership positions, on-campus jobs, internships, research projects, community engagement, and other out-of-class learning experiences. And so our presenters today are Lance Sharp, the My Spartan Story coordinator, and Sarah Schultz, who's the director of My Spartan Story. And I think with that, I can hand it over to Sarah and Lance.
Thanks so much, Dan, and good morning and almost afternoon to everyone. As shared, I'm Sarah Schultz, and my colleague Lance Sharp and I are thrilled to spend the next hour with you introducing My Spartan Story and the Spartan Experience Record. Go ahead and get set up here. Dan started with a great introduction, and to continue to speak to that, I wanted to start with an introduction of what our focus will be for our webinar today. We'll do a brief introduction to My Spartan Story and Co-Curricular Records. We'll introduce you to our foundations and process for building My Spartan Story, and to speak to what our implementation has looked like. Additionally, we'll speak to our successes and challenges and future opportunities with the Co-Curricular Record, and we will have time at the end for discussion. As Dan shared, we welcome you to place questions within the chat throughout. Whoever isn't presenting, me and Lance will be monitoring the chat. So there are some things we may likely we may touch base on throughout, but some of those we may hold to the end. So please know we'll make sure to answer all your questions today. So to jump in, what is My Spartan Story? As Dan introduced, My Spartan Story is Michigan State University's co-curricular record, which formally recognizes and supports student learning occurring beyond the classroom. Dan also introduced many of those great learning moments that many of us in the room participated in as students. Maybe we support those opportunities today or play a key role in other ways in the out-of-class learning experience on campus. When we think of opportunities, we think of students who are engaging in community engagement, who are a part of a leadership role on campus in a student group, a part of an on-campus job or an internship. We think of students who are engaged in many unique opportunities that they find in conversation with a faculty staff mentor. Historically at MSU, we know these learning moments are occurring in many facets and areas throughout our very large decentralized institution. And we at MSU wanted to find a way to bring together those learning moments to empower students with for further meaning of their out-of-class experience. But we as MSU also wanted to further understand our students and their overall success beyond the classroom and how that ties into their greater success. And therefore, we are excited to further introduce to you what we did to do that with My Spartan Story and the Spartan Experience Record. To help for further situate where our co-curricular comes into play in the larger scope of learning at Michigan State University, I'd like to introduce you to our learning activities wheel. So historically at MSU and as at most colleges and universities, the primary record of learning students have received documenting their learning is the transcript. That is, of course, really focusing on the curricular space of program requirements, courses for credits, certificates, and some other key items that would formally be documented there. With our wheel, I always like to point out that if we look at this wheel as reflecting our data that we've had, the information we have historically collected and been able to make meaning of has been on the curricular side. With the creation of My Spartan Story, we have a couple key powerful new opportunities. First being, we are empowering students with another formal MSU verified record of their learning, focused solely on their out of class, or as we refer to out of class throughout our session today, the co-curricular learning experience. So those introductions of two experiences we shared are exactly what are included on the record, and Lance will introduce you momentarily to the record. But in time, with this new data set that we have with My Spartan Story, we also have a lot of new powerful opportunities to see those rich learning connections from the curricular space to the co-curricular and vice versa, but in time to really lead us to understand pathways of engagement and student success in much more holistic terms than we've ever had the opportunity to do for our undergraduate students at Michigan State University. All right. With that, I want to transition now to if the concept of co-curricular records is new to you, I wanted to provide a bit more information around co-curricular records. So typically, where a co-curricular record may differ from a comprehensive learner record is co-curricular does not include experiences that are tied to the classroom. So our co-curricular record is very much a pure CCR in that sense, as our experiences currently must occur outside of the classroom and are not formally recognized on the transcript, if you will. But when it comes to CCRs, there's a lot of rich value added to the institution and also to students, as well as to our colleges and divisions of what we are able to learn. But taking a step further back, there's a lot of great questions to start asking when thinking about a CCR. What we have on your screen here is a lot of the conversations we engaged in at MSU when we were getting started of what does it mean to be a well-rounded or Spartan? What kind of activities do exist on campus, and how are students learning through these activities? How can institutions show proof of learning? We know with accreditation and other pushes from various industries of showing our proof and our value as an institution, is that conversation has really expanded in recent years, and co-curricular records further speak to that. And how can students articulate their learning? I always like to end on this one is there's a lot of value shared for students, the institution, faculty, staff of how this impacts how we shape co-curricular learning, But most importantly, the record creates new learning opportunities for students to make meaning of their college experience and how they've engaged, not only engaged, but what they've learned in those meaningful experiences beyond the classroom. So with the launch of the record, we've had a lot of excitement for conversations we've gotten to have with students and also how we've gotten to engage with faculty and staff in our partnerships. But the co-curricular record piece, I hope this further expands to how co-curricular records really add value in many ways and answer a variety of important questions that we are interested in learning and information we're interested in empowering students with. To further help understand how we as MSU look to explore those questions and create a co-curricular record which address those questions, we started creating My Spartan Story in spring 2016 under the Hub for Innovation and Learning Technology. And at that time, we had a team of one full-time staff and a couple other staff that were part-time on the project. So we had a core group of colleagues who were really facilitating focus groups, interviews, connecting with faculty, staff, and students all throughout MSU to really create a co-curricular record that was representative of our needs throughout a very large decentralized institution. The next key step in our process was our vendor selection to really help further prototype and shape our record, which we work alongside Orbis Communications for our work and have really enjoyed the work we've gotten to do to create the record and to build APIs and some other things we're happy to speak to. And where a lot of our conversation will focus on is where things have grown and our challenges with since we have launched. We formally launched to campus in fall 2020. 10 out of 10, exceptional time to launch a new initiative, being remote and lots of uncertainty. Jokes aside, we really had a lot of great partnerships we had fostered. During the 19 to 20 school year, we engaged in what we called a soft launch to really help build the record. Is in many ways, building something like this is a bit of a back and forth of, we wanted to have opportunities in the record, so we really needed to help grow the record as much as possible before we launched to students. So we would hope students would have something on their record. So we'll speak more to that. But right now we're in the presence of integrating into campus and the greater student experience. All right, so to help further situate our work, Lance will be further introducing our record momentarily. For time, I just want to circle in on the center definition here, that we, for the co-curricular record, formally defined co-curricular as follows: as an intentional learning activity which does not bear academic credit, and the program has articulated learning goals and learning outcomes assessment. So we really want to see that full picture of student learning, that the learning outcomes are established, but there's also an appropriate assessment strategy outlined for us to understand and get a sense of to really ensure integrity as we build the co-curricular record. So as shared, anything that would fall in the curricular space is formally recognized on our transcript. Co-curricular is, of course, Spartan Experience Record, which is our formal name for our co-curricular record. You may hear us say SCR as we move forward, but wanted to make sure to point that out. And lastly, on the extracurricular side, that's not a space we are formally tracking through any records at this time, but we do recognize there are other learning activities that may not fall in a formal curriculum space throughout our campus as well. And with that, I'm going to transition to Lance to further speak to our process and foundations of the record.
Thank you, Sarah. So one of the things I kind of want to go over with you all, just kind of know, how is this an official record for Michigan State? So we have a submission process that we're going to kind of do a quick overview of, and then we're going to kind of dive deeper into the Spartan Experience Record or the Co-Curricular Record. As anything that has an official record with the university, there's that submission process you have to go through, whether it's going through academic governance, whether you have a syllabus for academic programs. We kind of do the same way. And so one of the things we do is everything that's submitted to My Spartan Story has to have a backing of a faculty or a staff member from the university. And the reason we do that is so that way we know, one, that the faculty and staff member can be there to answer some questions about what's going on, what kind of learning actually took place, and that assessment piece. That's the huge pieces for us. So once we have the faculty member, they're going to kind of put everything together, submit it to us. We do a quick review of it as my Spartan Story staff and just make sure that, hey, do you have all the documents in? We don't go too deep into looking at what the information is. We kind of leave that to our advisory committee we have. Our advisory committee members, they are ones who will review every submission and every position that's labeled. So they are made up of staff and faculty from all across the university. We intentionally have somebody from most of the colleges. We have people from different divisions. We have different people from student affairs to our College of Business to faculty members to academic advisors. We intentionally make sure we have an advisory committee that's made up of different roles and different personalities, if you will. So that way we can have people reviewing these submissions and give really good feedback. So once we get feedback from them, whether it's saying that the learning outcomes don't really align with this position, or if it's more along the lines of like, we understand this real perfectly, this makes perfect sense to us. Once we kind of get those, we'll kind of get some information back to the faculty and staff who did the submission. So here's some information we have from you. Like, can we get some more advisement on what to do with this? Or, hey, everything was great, you're approved. Once everything's approved, it goes into the My Spartan Story, and then students can either go through our catalog of opportunities, find those things that they've been a part of, and request to have that added to their Spartan Experience record or their co-curricular record, if you will. Or at the end of the term, our faculty and staff can also go in and do what's called validation. So this is where they actually go in, add the net IDs or the first part of your, your username for your email, in case you use different places. And they will actually add those things into our system, and then our students can have those things automatically put onto their records. So at the end of the year, when they want to, or any time throughout the year, they can go to our office of the registrar's office and request their Spartan Experience record, and be able to kind of see what they've been involved in throughout the years that they've been here. So I think if Sarah goes to the next slide, we'll kind of go into breakdown of what all these things are. So one of the first things we look at as My Spartan Story is we look at categories. We want to figure out what your activities, your roles, your positions, where do they kind of fall into play? We have anything from education to creativity, especially for our groups that are more artistic bound. We want to make sure they had a category that made them make sense and kind of be added to the record. This came back from a lot of feedback from a lot of our colleges and our departments on campus, trying to think of like, what are some good categories? We only wanted to do like a few, so we did 10 that they all can fit into. As of right now, the positions and activities can only fit into one category. They cannot do multiples. And so we tell our submitters, pick which one feels the best fit for you. That's one of the major things we want them to kind of think about is, where do they see their activities fitting into? Because a lot of times our students are like, well, I'm education, but I'm also leadership and I'm also involvement. Okay, which one do you think makes the most sense for you? This way we kind of get that, like, we kind of make the joke of, it's your story, how would you like to write it? Which is kind of where we get My Spartan Story. Because we want to recognize that no two students are going to have the same story that they're here for the 4, 5, 6 years. So this way it's kind of giving us that kind of more in-depth look at who they are. But we have different categories, and once they have the category selected, we have them go and keep going through the submission process. Because one of the biggest ones we want to look at is also the learning outcomes. Now we took some time with these and kind of looked at major sources all across our university. We kind of took 6 different source lists that we kind of took all their learning outcomes, realized there's 140 of them, and said that is way too many. So we kind of took our time to kind of figure out what are the unique learning outcomes we wanted to look at. So we're going to kind of get that down to about 29. We are looking at hopefully the next 5 years going through another learning outcome process to make sure we're looking at which ones have not been used, which ones have been used a lot, which ones need to be broken down some more. And really kind of taking the time to figure out, like, what does that look like for that piece? We'll pop over soon. I've got a question in the chat. Do students have access to a Spartan Experience record beyond graduation? Yes, they do. We do say that about a year or 2 after they graduate, though, we're not able to really add a whole lot to their records. So we want to get everything done before they graduate. And the main reason for that time period is because we can't verify that they learned the things, or a lot of times verifying that they were really involved in that process. Especially since many of y'all have kind of been experienced, if you're working higher ed, there's a lot of changeover happening right now. And so being able to kind of keep track of who all's been involved with what sometimes can be difficult. So on the screen right now is looking at our half of our learning outcomes that we've chosen. So you kind of see, what they're broken down to. We're making sure that our students, when they choose, or our faculty and staff and students are looking at these, that they can see what they've been able to grow and learn from. Some of the biggest ones that we've been really kind of surprised is balancing priorities and managing time is a huge hit for our students and for our staff, because I kind of see that's something that's very important for our students to be able to kind of do. Which makes complete sense when you think of being involved in the collegiate level, is you have classes and you also have everything else going on. And then I think the other big ones we always have is that demonstrating effective interpersonal communication. A lot of students are really surprised by seeing that being mentioned so many times in so many positions. And so it's one of the things, as we're thinking about student engagement, we're trying to teach our students, these are things you don't think about when you're involved on, you're outside the classroom things. And then Sarah will go to our next screen. We'll show the rest of those. So you kind of see again, the rest of our 29 learning outcomes. We kind of make sure we try balancing the idea of what they are doing, how they could be engaged with those pieces, really thinking about that engagement and what are they getting out of these roles. So like I said, we chose 29 learning outcomes, so our staff are able to kind of go through and pick those. For any position to go onto our record, they have to have a minimum of 1 and a maximum of 5 that they can choose from. The biggest reason for that is our Spartan experience record. The way it's kind of designed and evolved, 5 is the max we could really put on there and make it not look crowded, if you will. It's also one of those things we also realize that 1 to 5 learning outcomes is a lot for a student to achieve in a semester or a year program. And so we really want to make sure that we're setting them for success, because the one thing we don't want them to do is have someone come through and pick 15 learning outcomes and think, well, the student didn't complete all 15 of these, they don't get this on the record. We want to make sure that that's, with any kind of goal, we want to make sure it's achievable. And we kind of really, listen to our, when we're kind of developing my Spartan story, it's listening to the group members and the faculty and staff saying 5 is a good number, because that's one thing we can make sure our students can achieve in a year. So right now we're going to look at the Spartan experience record, or the co-curricular record that we have. Now, as Sarah kind of mentioned previously, we're one of the few in the country that have this really. And so we want to make sure we start off with kind of a, what is this document? Why is it valuable? And how is it different from a resume? This gives information to the student. It also gives the information to those who are reviewing this from our students, so they kind of have a little bit bigger understanding of things. And then you'll see at the bottom, we have the categories listed. These are going to be the ones that are going to be listed on the Spartan experience record. They can have minimum of 1 up to all 10. One of the things we always say with this one, it's your quality over quantity. We're not trying to do a bingo sheet, so please do not try getting all 10 categories just for the fun of it. So you kind of see on our first page, we kind of start listing all the different roles that the student has. We're going to zoom into a couple of them here in a second, but we kind of want to have you kind of see as in community engagement, intercultural involvement, all those ribbons are represented from the categories ahead or previously seen. And so those are kind of how those are displayed. Sarah, we'll go to the next slide real quick. I know we're talking about a lot about the co-curricular record and badging programs. So we want to make sure we also kind of gave a little attention to our involvement tab. We have Broad 360 in, networking badge, which is a badging program here we have within our College of Business. And we have been integrating their badging program within the Spartan Experience Record and the Co-Curricular Record, because they weren't really able to kind of showcase that any other place. And so we've been working with a couple of different colleges who are starting the badging process and the credential process, and we're integrating those into our larger SER. So that way you kind of see how that kind of goes into play. And then Sarah will go to the next slide. We'll kind of zoom into the leadership ribbon, so we can kind of break it down a little bit more. So for instance, at the very top, you'll kind of see the year that this is all taking place. So this year, 2021-22, the bolder green part is going to be the position and what the student's role was. The next line is who kind of hosted that position. So for the first one, we have the Broad Peer Career Coach. That's in our Russell Palmer Career Management Center here at Michigan State, which is within the Eli Road College of Business. So the kind of the bigger division and or college. And then the last one on that same area, we have the date. So we just want to know, when did the student participate in this event? So this can be a semester, this can be a year, this can be a day. It really depends on what's going on with that role. We have positions here at Michigan State where students can present at our undergraduate university research fair, and so URAF presenter, which is a one-day event where they do present presentations of the research they've been doing. We do recognize that the research isn't from a day, but the presentation itself is one. We also work with our community engagement office, where we take people's who have done our Martin Luther King Day of Service or going to our Spring Day of Service events, and we put those on the record as well, as those are one-day events. The middle section column goes over your position description. Now, these are always going to be written in past tense, and the reason for that is because once the learning is complete, and so once the position has been completed, that is when they go onto the record. So it's one of those things we want to make sure we're talking about the learning piece with that. So this is always when we say responsibilities included or the tour guides provided. That past tense is very crucial in this piece. And then the last column is looking at the learning outcomes that are associated with the position. And so again, this goes into, as a result, I learned to do these things. So the big thing with this is really is a conversation starter for our students. They're able to kind of see what they've done, where they've grown, and what are things they participate in that they really didn't know they did. I always make the joke that some of our students never think about inclusive practices that they've done, or that they've, with a career coach, they've facilitated a training. Anytime they're talking to a student about their resumes and how to write those, thinking about cover letters, thinking about how to answer questions in an interview, they're not just having a conversation with another peer, they're actually training them on how to do things. And so what we're trying to do is help them understand that they are doing more than what they thought they were doing. So this is a great way for them to kind of see those pieces kind of be laid out. And so I think looking at the question, Mark, I know I had a question about time limit on distribution of the record. Isn't the CCR activity recorded once validated? Yes. So we have the, once the learning is completed on all those pieces, that's when we add to the record. I know as we've been getting started with ours, we have been doing around a little bit of backlogging, trying to help our staff and faculty add students who have been past year or two, if they have the information and they can kind of verify that they completed the learning, if you will. But yeah, one of the things we try to do is once the learning is completed, we want to add to the record as we can. And then this right here is just the last page of our record, kind of showcasing that Steve Chabot, who's our university registrar, and Mark Larger, who's our associate provost for undergraduate education, they will sign off on all of these, making an official document, as well as the seal from Michigan State. This just kind of wraps up the record, kind of showcases that, this is a legitimate way for our students to kind of say, I did all these things in my 4, 5, 6 years. And so that way they can talk about those things. They can be able to kind of verify that with others, with whether they're talking to graduate schools, looking at scholarship committees and all those type of things. They're able to kind of utilize these pieces.
Thanks, Lance. All right, I'll transition now to speaking about implementation. And before we do that, is there another question, Lance, or are we up to date? I just wanted to, I realize I can't as easily read them without interrupting the session.
I think we're up to date. I think we're good.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we wanted to give you a sense of how we brought My Spartan Story to life on campus formally, beginning in fall 2020. And what a lot of our strategies have focused on to help formally grow the record. So much of our work and conversations are with faculty and staff, of course, to help formally educate them on the record, understand the benefits, understand how this supports their students, as well as larger campus initiatives. And therefore, we've created a lot of spaces for faculty and staff to engage with us directly. And may that be through our monthly workshops. We host usually 1 to 2 a month. We've done a lot of direct outreach to units and colleagues over programs that are a wonderful fit for inclusion in the record. I also facilitate a lot of presentations to campus leadership. We have quite a few. We have assistant deans, associate deans, We have a lot of layers of leadership at MSU, so therefore opportunities to present to them and share updates has been really critical to our work as well. On the student side, I would love to share and point out a lot of our growth with the record during the pandemic. I was able to hire Lance's position. So until actually almost a year today in June, I was the only full-time staff member on the Co-Curricular Record. And to really best meet the needs of our students and our campus, I had heavily advocated for a position who could really focus on the student experience and promotion and education of the record. And that's where Lance's position primarily is responsible for day-to-day. So Lance has engaged in a lot of presence at campus-wide events and presentations to groups, may it be RSOs, facilitating conversations to RAs and other peer leaders on campus who have an integral role in helping also educate their peers on the record. So that peer-to-peer piece has been huge. Facilitating our ambassador program. Excuse me, to name a few ways, we have expanded our work with students. Additionally, our partnerships have been invaluable to growing the record with faculty, staff, and students. We work closely with Student Life, the Center for Community Engaged Learning, and undergraduate research, all who facilitate a large piece of co-curricular learning and are well represented within the co-curricular record. We cannot speak enough to our partnerships. And to share with you the results of our partnerships and where we are today. Thus far, we have over 24 divisions and colleges who have directly participated, not only in the soft launch, but in the day-to-day growth of the record. We recently surpassed 550 positions in the record, and we hope to surpass 600 here within June. And those 550 positions, over 6,400 undergraduate Spartans are represented through those 550 positions. So in a short time, we're really proud of the growth we have, and mainly are more proud of the partnerships we've established and grown, and the colleagues who have invested in growth of our campus-wide initiative to really make this possible for our students and for our university. It has been a wonderful experience, and we're excited for where we're heading and for what's to come. So when it comes to impact and where we often are asked, where's the value of the record? I know our conversation today has greatly spoken to some of those introductory questions and our work of student learning, some of those key takeaways we have. But some of the things we share directly with faculty staff are what you see on your screen. First, of course, that we've created a brand new MSU verified student record. So there's a lot of value and excitement for faculty and staff to have their program be formally recognized, not for themselves, but of course for their students on the Spartan Experience record. We also promote, we're a very data-driven campus. So in many ways, the platform itself is generating a lot of new data and analytics, and we are close to launching data dashboards to campus to further understand how their students, for example, in a college are engaging within their college, but also they're getting a sense of students who are studying in their college, how they're engaging throughout MSU. And we've had some really interesting conversations of how that new information we're able to share can be used and to support our continued student success efforts at MSU. Lastly, me and Lance often speak to our work where we're often in a marathon when it comes to My Spartan Story. A lot of what we're gathering now of data and information, initiatives such as this takes time to build. So we really need to have about 4 to 5 years of data before we'll really get to see pathways of engagement and make those inferences to student success. And those are all conversations and data points we're really excited to build in our process as we get to achieve other key milestones and support students in how they're shaping and understanding their learning beyond the classroom. And with that, I'm going to allow Lance to speak to a bit of how we're also promoting the record to students and also some of the ways where we're seeing it in use.
So as I kind of mentioned earlier, one of the biggest things we're seeing is our students are really kind of being able to kind of have different conversations around what they've done, what they're experiencing. So one of the biggest ones is they're able to kind of search and find some new co-curricular experiences. So not only are they able to do research, are they able to do on-campus employment, they're also able to look at different student organizations to see what their goals, their learning outcomes are associated with what they want to do. We kind of make the joke that, as students, like, I want to be all about advocacy work. Well, here's how you can do that. Here's how we can actually look at advocacy groups on campus. If they're wanting to really think about what can they really get out of that on-campus job, we really want them to be able to kind of see what they've learned from it all. And so that's kind of where those partnerships that Sarah referenced earlier kind of come into play really well. We've been working with our culinary group on campus. So our students, we hire hundreds, if not thousands of students to work in our culinary operations, whether it's working at the bakery, working the line at the cafeteria. All those positions we've been able to put onto the record, and we're working with our culinary team to think about what the learning is with that, especially when you think students are trying to figure out, all I do is serve food every day. I'm not learning anything from that. You learn how to talk to people. You learn how to learn what's inside the recipes that you're serving. You're able to answer questions about allergies, all those type of things. You're learning about things. I'm going to kind of associate that with what they've done. Which kind of goes right to the next point of the personal reflection and development. We're really able to kind of see their growth happening, especially when we think of students after their 3 to 4 years on campus. They're able to kind of see what they've progressed through, being able to kind of see the positions they've had within a certain organization. They're able to see what they've expanded on, see what they've grown from. That in turn helps with resume development. We're able to kind of talk a little deeper in the resume piece, or even with the interview preparation. They're able to have those conversations and really be able to kind of talk about those things. Because I know our career services has representation on our advisory board, and they're talking about how they're trying to loop that more into when they think about resumes. Looking at your Spartan experience record has great ways to rephrase how you're looking at some of those organizations you've been a part of. We also have them kind of start sharing it with their faculty and staff to think about letters of recommendation. One of the things we've heard from our faculty is they're wanting to start using this in the future years, so they can ask the students, instead of saying, well, give me a resume, tell me what you do outside my classroom. This way they can actually see this and kind of see what their students have been a part of. Really kind of expand on those letters of reference to those graduate schools, to those scholarship committees, so they actually see, let them go more in depth with what their students have been doing. That all goes in conjunction with sharing as additional document for graduate school, employment, internship applications. I serve on a scholarship committee where one of the things we're hoping to do is in the next few years start implementing this to be part of that, so that way we can see what the students have been doing, rather than just relying on a resume that may not mention everything, or relying on an essay question for them to include all their involvements. We can actually see what they've done. And kind of match up what they've been doing. And so for our students, it's really learning a way to capture everything they've been doing, but also helping them continue that conversation and really explaining who they are. I think that's the biggest piece for us, is our students are loving the fact that they can have that verified document that says, I've done all of this outside the classroom. This is what puts me, sets me apart from everyone else who has the same degree I have. I've done this and this and this. So it's really been helping them kind of those stronger conversations.
All right. Thanks, Lance. I will transition to sharing some of our lessons learned with launching My Spartan Story, as well as our successes. So as shared, we've gotten to establish and expand in many great partnerships, which has been really critical in our work. So a focus of what we have done is really wanting, our efforts have been focused to map learning within every department within a college, for example. So the College of Communication, Arts and Sciences comes to mind, as we've gone from ad and PR to general communications to other departments to really bring to life. They have a lot of experiences. Faculty facilitate that are out of class experiences. So just an example of, we've attended faculty meetings, we've attended student group meetings, and all of those bring together to really achieve our goals of mapping co-curricular learning wherever it occurs at MSU, but most importantly, doing that in an intentional way. So hopefully by the end of the summer or next year, we'll have most of their college mapped. So that not only ensures students are having those opportunities, of course, reflected on their SCR, but really creates a really rich data set for ComArts moving forward that we'll be able to share and speak to with them in the future. Another success, we've got to formally launch the record. As you got a sense from our timeline, we started in 2016 and launched in 2020. And this was definitely a very intensive process to get to where we are today. I don't think we've mentioned yet, but the Spartan Experience Record is housed in the registrar's office, and it's a new checkbox students select when requesting their transcript. And to make that possible, we had to build a custom API with our vendor, and also had a lot of testing to go along with that to ensure our processes were set and working efficiently. And there's a lot of layers to get to that final step. So formally launching the record was huge excitement, and we had a project manager in IT for this time, which was really essential to our success. Lance and I facilitate a lot of conversations where we may not be the experts in. So I can say we've learned a lot about data and reviewing API pulled data. But altogether, that was a huge success for us to get to that point. And as shared as well, with our successes with the record and continued growth of the record and focus of student success and co-curricular on campus, I was thankful to be able to expand to include a coordinator, and of course was just fulfilled by Lance. Some of our challenges that we encountered, I cannot speak enough, as I know all of our day-to-day as a whole within our positions has definitely been impacted in small ways to large ways by COVID. So we were actually planning to do an on-campus launch, and a couple weeks before fall 2020, we pivoted to be fully remote. And we stayed fully remote for the whole 2020 to 2021 academic year. So how we were initially envisioning approaching the launch and building the record and ensuring that with students drastically changed at a quick point at the semester. So with that, we were able to have a lot of successes as shared with our partnerships, but that definitely impacted what we thought would be our launch year and what that looked like for growth of numbers and things. We had a lot of success, but not nearly what, when we looked at peer institutions in their first year, what we anticipated. And of course, I think it is critical to point out that co-curricular engagement significantly varied of what that looked like. We had many student groups who were inactive for that point in time, student positions that were paused, our array positions, for example, reshaped for a bit during that time. So what co-curricular engagement was understood to be and looks like was very different. So how we promoted the record and engaged in that space in our conversation was a unique challenge to us as well. Beyond our successes and challenges, we have a lot of forward growth we are continuing to build momentum and excitement for, and I'll have Lance speak to that.
So one of the biggest things for us has been our growth of our record. So one of the biggest, I think, within that as well, is that we've been trying to expand those partnerships. We've been listening and adapting to needs as we've been hearing them. Currently, we're in talks with a lot of our Greek organizations, trying to figure out what makes the most sense for those positions on our record. If anyone has advised any of our fraternity sorority life groups, you know, there's a lot of positions that you don't want to advertise what the roles do, or maybe the names of, because that's more of a secret part of the Greek organization. And so we've been working in conjunction with them, trying to adapt what their needs are, and really think about those things ahead of time, rather than trying to disclose information that they may not want us to disclose. We've also been working with our on-campus employment offices, trying to think about what does learning look like in their roles, because a lot of times, you know, that's a question that hasn't been asked. And so they can say like, oh, they learn how to, you know, do this and this and this. Okay, let's adapt those into learning outcomes. And how do we talk about assessment pieces? Because one of the things that we do is we don't necessarily take in the data for the assessment pieces. We look at our staff and faculty take care of those pieces and kind of keep track of that within their own roles. So we don't necessarily have I was gonna say, we can give out resources for different types of assessments because a lot of our groups automatically think assessments means quizzes or tests. And there's more ways to do that. So whether it's conversations, reflection pieces. I know we had a question about digital portfolios. Some groups actually do keep it going. We ourselves do not keep track of those pieces. We just ask for our staff and faculty to tell us what they've done and how they want to do it. And that they actually get those pieces into play. There's also talks about some of our community engagement partners. They have been great with resources about how they talk to students about reflecting on engagement and being given back to the community. When we've given those out to some of our staff and faculty across the campus. Data analysis and data sharing, we're constantly trying to get more and more data to know who our students are, what they're about. Some of our scholarship groups on campus are really interested in trying to see what their students have done once they got to campus and how involved they've gotten. And so we're hoping that we can even grow more of those pieces. Some of our colleges are very interested in seeing where their students are going to, what they're being involved in. I know like I said, we've been working really close with our college of business, and our engineering college has also been reaching out to us for information about what the students are doing. And so we can answer that question, kind of give them more details. And one of the big questions right now we're kind of working around is the credit bearing experiences. Should they be included in this? And so one of the things we've kind of talked about is, the transcript showcases the class they've taken. But then we also have research, which is very interesting. It's a weird category to be a part of, as well as internships. So here at Michigan State, some of our colleges give you credit for internships. Some of them do not. Some of them give you credit for research. Some of them do not. And so some of those pieces are not captured on the transcript when they're thinking about internships and what they've done and how they've done it. It just says internship, doesn't give any more explanation. So we're in constant conversation around what does that look like for the next step. And then we're creating some new certificate programs here at Michigan State for undergraduates. And so we're trying to figure out where do those go into play. Are those more classes? Are they for the transcript? Are they for more involvement pieces, which will be great for the record, the co-curricular record? So those are all areas we're expanding, constantly growing on, and constantly having those questions around.
Thanks, Lance. And with that, I wanted to share that we hope you've gotten to get a great sense of our co-curricular record today and how we are really excited for our work to move forward to support an MSU which better understands student success through co-curricular learning and empowers our undergraduate students with a record of their learning beyond the classroom. Thank you. And with that, we're happy to transition to questions. You're welcome at this time if you'd like to raise your hand and unmute or place anything in the chat. I'll leave our contact. Lance, do you want to put our emails in the chat as well? I'll leave them up for a second. Got a couple of questions popping up. I'm happy to pull those up for us. A few things. Yeah, I'm happy to answer. The question is, does the record look the same if a student is viewing it versus requesting it from the registrar? So good question. So a student can log into the My Spartan Story platform and they can see what is approved and pending on their record, and it shows up as cards, kind of how we describe it. They're something you can click on to look further at information regarding that experience. But when they request it, there are we say at that step, students can create their record. So anything that is approved, they can checkbox to then add to the record. But over the example document Lance introduces pretty much a parallel of what the record looks like. So what it looks like in the platform is a little different than the final record. That's the question. Great question on our platform. So we utilize Orbis Communications. They are a Canadian-based higher education tech company. I don't think we've mentioned yet co-curricular records and experiential education. There's a mandate in Canada. So co-curricular records are very common at institutions there. So a lot of we work alongside a lot of colleagues who support co-curricular records through Orbis throughout Canada. So we do not use Handshake for our work, but we do partner with our Career Services Network department, who does manage Handshake, to reach out to faculty and staff and supervisors of positions to then include those in My Spartan Story. We'd love to have some further platforms that share data to us to include. That's something in the future we'd like to explore more. But we do have a lot of ways we support our partnerships outside the platform.
Scrolling up a little bit, Sarah and Lance.
Yeah.
I see Carrie has a question. I don't think we covered this one yet. Does My Spartan Story leverage the CLR standard at this point?
Yes, that's a great question. Yes, we do. I wanted to make sure we mentioned it. I'm glad the question was brought up. Yes, by all means, we followed CLR standards when creating the record. And I know our vendor has also looked to IMS Global Standards for growth of their platform as a whole moving forward. So by all means, IMS Global has been integral in our underpinnings of success of the record.
So looking at Mark's question of how's the record fulfilled PDF paper, do you also express the record using the CLR data standard? How are data exchanges with the vendor achieved? So for the stop part, I'll take that one because it's easier. How's the record fulfilled? So as Sarah and I mentioned, it goes through our Office of Registrar, and right now it's all coming out as a PDF because due to COVID, we've been doing a lot more PDF pieces. We're hoping in the future we can start going back to the paper piece, but the students are liking the PDF. That way they can just have it immediately. And so we're able to kind of do that with them. We kind of answered the CLR data standard. How are data exchanges with the vendor achieved? I'm gonna let Sarah answer that question.
Yeah, that's a great question. As mentioned, we built custom APIs to send data. So that is critical for us to make the record possible. But beyond that, our platform does integrate to our student information system. That brings all that information together in the My Spartan Story platform to then send to the registrar's office. So it's managed through the JSON, I believe I got that correct. So we work closely with colleagues in the registrar who will ensure things are working appropriately or if we have questions. But the API was built very specifically, so it takes the position to title you will, we have about 10 to 12 fields that are coded specifically so it's a very specific data set that we're sending to the registrar's office. So they're not trying to siphon through a variety of data. So that's how that works. I should mention, if you are in the phase of exploring a co-curricular record, the Orbis platform itself does create a record, but we wanted to tie into established processes on campus. So building the API and having to be a part of the transcript request process was really important to us. But the platform does have space and opportunities that will make it in the platform. So I thought I'd mention that.
And then for our next question, can the record be sorted by learning outcome instead of category? I'm going to switch out and steal the screen sharing from Sarah.
Oh, yep. I will stop sharing, Lance.
All right, so this right here is kind of our catalog of opportunities that we kind of referenced earlier for our students can kind of look into things. And so one of the biggest things that we enjoy about this is the filtering system within the program. So you actually sort by those learning outcomes. And so that way, if we wanted to look for like advocating for myself and others, what actually has those kind of learning outcomes associated with it. They can also search by different tags, so they're very much about campus building. So for instance, they won't work our planetarium. I don't believe I have anything right now from the planetarium because they're just getting back started. But they can also sort by those pieces. They can also sort by colleges, divisions, all those pieces that are searchable. If they only want to do it for fall only, academic year programs, They also are able to do community partner registration for our community engagement pieces. Our catalog really is trying our best to like place those things into play so our students can search it any way they can, any way they want to. So that way they can really be a part of that piece as much as they want to.
And to add on to, when a student's logged into their view, it'll show an overview of their experiences, but there's also a list of the learning outcomes they've achieved. So they also can kind of get a broader view in one place of their learning outcomes. Good question.
And then I think if the next question was around working part-time jobs, their jobs may only be for making money, be a way for the project to give them more experience there in that kind of situation. Currently, we're trying to track a lot of our on-campus employment positions, which are for our students are a lot of the on-campus part-time jobs. And what I've kind of done on your screen right now, as you can kind of see, is our stateroom restaurant. We have a here in Michigan State, we're able to have our Kellogg Hotel and Conference Center is part of our campus. And so a lot of our students are able to kind of get on-campus jobs within our hotel and conference center here on campus. So you kind of see the different learning outcomes within the stateroom, which is a restaurant we have inside of that. We have the different positions. So you have a bartender. So it kind of goes into what the learning outcomes are associated with that. The host, the server, the service assistant, service cashier, student supervisor, and all those pieces. So you can kind of see what the role is, what they've learned with those pieces. So that way, whenever the student's adding those to the record or we validate them onto the record, all of those pieces go onto there as well. And so these have been some great conversations we've had with our Kellogg Hotel and Conference Center employees who work with students to really ensure that these are the things that they're learning. And so we're able to kind of associate those pieces onto that.
For your helpful notes, Dan.
Of course.
Any last questions? We probably have time for one more question or two, and we'll have Dan wrap us up in just a second. Thanks everyone for joining us today. It's been a pleasure to connect with you.
Fantastic. Thank you both, Lance and Sarah. Sorry for interrupting you, Lance, if you're about to.
No, you're good.
Okay.
Thank you everybody for being here. Yes.
Yes, absolutely. And Kelly Hoyland, when she returns, she'll be following up with more information, as I wrote in the chat, and particularly about resources from today. I think the slide deck and other things. So thanks again for coming, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks so much, everyone. Me and Lance will hang out if you have any additional questions you may want to ask. Thank you so much.
Hi, Debbie, are you still there? Just didn't want to hang up the phone.
Yes, I know.
That was great. Thank you both so much.
Dan. Appreciate
think-
the opportunity. I enjoyed. We enjoyed this. This was great.
That's great. A lot of great interest and good questions. So
Yeah, absolutely.
much appreciated.
Perfect. Well, thanks so much, Dan.
Of course. We'll talk to you soon.
Yes, and we'll follow up with the slides here today. You'll have that, and we'll go from there. Perfect.
Perfect. Thank you both.
again.
Take
All
care.
right. Bye-bye.